So, hey, this is Anna Kilt from fourth period, and I'm going to be doing the screencast this week for Scarlet Letter, Chapter 9. So, let's go ahead and get started. Thou will love her dearly, repeated Hester Prynne, as she and the minister sat watching little Pearl. Dost thou not think her beautiful? And see with what natural skill she has made those simple flowers adorn her. Had she gathered pearls and diamonds and rubies in the wood, they could not have become her better. She is a splendid child, but I know whose brow she has. So basically here, Hester is trying to show off Pearl to Demi, and I guess it would be natural for her to try and show him what good a child they produced together, so that possibly they could look to starting a future together if Dimmesdale was to accept Pearl. Dost thou know, Hester, said Arthur Dimmesdale with a unique, unquiet smile, that this dear child, tripping about always at thy side, hath caused me many an alarm? Methought, O Hester, what a thought is that, and how terrible to dread it, that my own features were partly repeated in her face, and so strikingly that the world might see them, but she is mostly thine. No, not mostly, answered the mother, with a tender smile. A little longer, and thou needest not be afraid to trace whose child she is. But how strangely beautiful she looks, with those wild flowers in her hair. It is as if one of the fairies, whom we left in our dear old England, hath decked her out to meet us. So basically, at this point, Dimmesdale and Hester are talking about how wild Hester's child looks, and Dimmesdale thinks that it's mostly up to Hester's genes, but Hester is saying no, she isn't so different from you. You'll see her in yourself when you take some time to look. It was with a feeling which neither of them had ever before experienced that they sat and watched Pearl's slow advance. In her was visible the tie that united them. She had been offered to the world these 7 years past as the living hieroglyphic in which was revealed the secret they so darkly sought to hide, all written in the symbol, all plainly manifest. Had there been a prophet or magician skilled to read the character of flame, and Pearl was the oneness of their being. So essentially at this point, the author is saying that Pearl is the tie between Hester and Dimmesdale. Be the foregone evil what it might, how could they doubt what their unearthly lives and future destinies were conjoined when they beheld at once the marital union and the spiritual idea in whom they met and were to dwell immortally together? Thoughts like these, and perhaps other thoughts which they did not acknowledge or define, threw an awe about the child as she came onward. Let her see nothing strange, no passion nor eagerness, in thy way of accosting her, whispered Hester. Our Pearl is a fitful and fantastic little elf sometimes, especially she is seldom tolerant of emotion, when she does not fully comprehend the why and wherefore. But the child hath strong affections. She loves me, and will love thee. So Hester right now is just assuring Dimmesdale that once he gets to know Pearl and Pearl gets to know him, they'll finally get to be able to know each other better, and there might be some sort of future with the two of them that's beyond this sort of hatred that Pearl has for Dimmesdale right now. Thou canst not think, said the minister, glancing aside at Hester Prynne, how my heart dreads this interview and yearns for it. But in truth, as I'd already told thee, children are not readily won to be familiar with me. They will not climb my knee, nor paddle in my ear, nor answer to my smile, but stand apart and eye me strangely. Even little babes, when I take them in my arms, weep bitterly. Yet Pearl, twice in her little lifetime, hath been kind to me. The first time, thou'st know it well. Last was when thou ledst her with thee to the house of yonder stern old governor. So Basically, Dimsdale is once again complaining about how children don't like him and how he has a hard time calming them down. He even said that babies would not sit in his arm quietly. But it's not hard to imagine that this would be the case for any very stiff preacher like Dimsdale. So he's basically complaining how he can't get children to like him, but when in actuality, what children would like a stuffy man who isn't willing to just like sit down and talk on their level or laugh. So he doesn't think that it's obvious when the audience would think it obvious. So continuing with the reading. And thou didst plead so bravely in her behalf and mine, answered the mother. I remember it, and so shall little Pearl. Fear nothing. She may be strange and shy at first, but will soon learn to love thee. By this time, Pearl had reached the margin of the brook and stood on the farther side, gazing silently at Hester and the clergyman, who still sat together on the mossy tree trunk, waiting to receive her. Just when she had paused, the brook changed to form a pool, so smooth and quiet that it reflected a perfect image of her little figure, with all the brilliant picturesqueness of her beauty, and in its adornment of flowers and wreathed foliage, but more refined and spiritualized than reality. This image, so nearly identical with the living Pearl, seemed to communicate somewhat of its own shadowy and intangible quality to the child itself, or herself. So at this point, in the small paragraph above here, Hester was trying to involve Dinsdale in the conversation by reminding him that he hasn't been completely absent in Pearl's life, that he did stick up for Pearl by asking the governor to let her stay with Hester as a reminder of a sin. So because of that, she's lived now 7 years under Hester's care. And then in the second paragraph, we see that Pearl is looking at her own shadow in the reflection of the pond, and this image, so nearly identical with the living Pearl, seemed to communicate somewhat of its own shadowy and intangible quality to the child herself. So it's just saying that Pearl is almost ethereal, almost like a fairy in the way that she's sort of prancing about the woods. It was strange the way in which Pearl stood, looking so steadfastly at them through the dim medium of the forest gloom, herself meanwhile all glorified with a ray of sunshine that was attracted thitherward as by a certain sympathy. In the brook beneath stood another child, another and the same, with likewise its ray of golden light. Hester felt herself, in some indistinct and tantalizing manner, estranged from Pearl, as if the child, in her lonely ramble through the wood, had strayed out of the sphere in which she and her mother dwelt together, and now vainly seeking to return to it. So essentially what they're saying is that Pearl has gone out of this own world and is trying to return to it, to a more practical livelihood that doesn't include fairies and flower wreaths around their heads. There was both truth and error in the impression. The child and mother were estranged, but through Hester's fault, not Pearl's. Since the latter rambled from her side, another inmate had been admitted within the circle and the mother's feelings, and so modified the aspect of them all, that Pearl, the returning wanderer, could not find her wonted place, and hardly knew where she was. So after Pearl has been wandering about the forest, she has trouble returning to Hester because she doesn't want to go back to this stuffy Puritan society. In actuality, she does belong to the more wild and free wilderness. I have a strange fancy, observed the sensitive minister, that this brook is the boundary between two worlds, and that thou canst never meet thy Pearl again. Or is she an elfish spirit, who, as the legends of our childhood taught us, is forbidden to cross a running stream? Pray hasten her, for this delay has already imparted a tremor to my nerves. So Dimsdale is basically saying that he's nervous about how wild Pearl looks like as a child and how he can't really relate to her. "Come, dearest child," said Hester, encouragingly and stretching out both her arms. "How slow thou art! When hast thou been so sluggish before now? Here is a friend of mine, who might be or must be thy friend also. Thou wilt have twice as much love henceforward as thy mother alone could give thee. Leap across the brook and come to us. Thou canst leap like a young deer." So basically what's going on now is that Hester is inviting Pearl to come meet Dimsdale as possibly a new parent. She does say that she could have twice as much love now with Dimsdale, and it's only just a brook's leap away. But it's uncharacteristic of Pearl to be hesitant in bounding across the river. She isn't quite ready to accept this stranger who she sees in society as shunning her, but then now in private confidence is arms open waiting to come meet her and possibly start a friendship. So basically Pearl's skeptic, or she is a skeptic of this new, more welcoming Dimsdale when all she's seen in society is someone who won't even look and give her a glance. Pearl, without responding in any manner to these honey-sweet expressions, remained on the other side of the brook. Now she fixed her bright, wild eyes on her mother, now on the minister, and now, them both in the same glance, as if to detect and explain to herself the relationship with which they bore to one another. For some unaccountable reason, as Arthur Dimsdale felt the child's eyes upon himself, his hand, with that gesture so habitual as to have become involuntary, stole over his heart. So, as we've seen throughout the book so far, Dimsdale is putting his hand over his heart, and personally, in my own opinion, I think that he might be stopping himself from having a heart pain or thinking of some sort of child bond that he could have had with Pearl, because every time Dimsdale looks at Hester or Pearl, he puts his hand over his heart, and I think that's just him thinking of what could have been and possibly thinking with pain at what he had forsaken in this child that he had abandoned for just his own selfish reasons, and I think it's just his guilt over his sin. At length, assuming a singular air of authority, Pearl stretched out her hand with the small forefinger extended and pointing evidently toward her mother's breast. Oh snap. So Pearl's basically just said that he can't be so friendly with her because of the scarlet letter on her mother's chest, and she's just ruining the moment by reminding him that it's still there. And beneath, in the mirror of the brook, there was the flower-girdled and sunny image of little Pearl, pointing her small forefinger too. "Thou strange child, why dost thou not come to me?" explained Hester. Pearl still pointed with her forefinger, and a frown gathered on her brow, the more impressive from the childish, the almost baby-like aspect of the features that conveyed it. As her mother still kept beckoning to her and arraying her face in a holiday suit of unaccustomed smiles, the child stamped her foot with yet a more imperious look and gesture. So basically what's happening now is that Pearl is realizing that she's getting so many smiley, happy looks from her mother and Dimsdale, and she realizes that this is unusual, so she's very unnerved by it, and she isn't willing to walk over to her mother. In the brook, again, was the fantastic beauty of the image, with its reflected frown, its pointed finger, and imperious gesture, giving emphasis to the aspect of little Pearl. "Hasten, Pearl, or I shall be angry with thee," cried Hester Prynne, who, however injured to such behavior on the elf child's part at other seasons, was naturally anxious for a more seemly deportment now. "Leap across the brook, child, and run hither, else I must come to thee. But Pearl, not a whit startled at her mother's threats, any more than mollified by her entreaties, now suddenly burst into a fit of passion, gesticulating violently and throwing her small figure into the most extravagant contortions. So, basically, a fancy way of saying that Pearl's now having a tantrum because she does not want to go over to greet Dimmesdale. It's sort of kind of like children who really don't want to go sit on Santa's lap. Pearl's basically just really not wanting to go meet the stranger. She accompanied this wild outbreak with piercing shrieks, and which the woods reverberated on all sides, so that, alone as she was in her childish and unreasonable wrath, it seemed as if a hidden multitude were leading her there. Sympathy and encouragement. Seen in the brook once more was the shadowy wrath of Pearl's image, crowned and girdled with flowers, but stamping its foot, wildly gesticulating, and, in the midst of it all, still pointing its small forefinger at Hester's bosom. I see what ails the child, whispered Hesper to the clergyman, and turning pale in spite of a strong effort to conceal her trouble and annoyance. Children will not abide the slightest change in the accustomed aspect of things that are daily before their eyes. Pearl misses something which she has always seen me wear. So basically, Pearl this whole time has been pointing at the bosom of Hester, wondering where has the scarlet letter gone? Why did her mother take it off? This is so improper, even in the woods. So Pearl is basically ruining the sort of sweet moment between Dimmesdale and Hester, and is reminding the two of them that they're not free from society, and that Hester should still wear the scarlet letter, if not on her own breast, but in those status and in her own sort of fabric and fibrous being, and that should also be reflected outside with the scarlet letter. I pray you, answered the minister, if thou hast any means of pacifying the child, do it forthwith. Save it where the cankered wrath of an old witch, like Mr. Hibbins, added he, attempting to smile. I know nothing that I would not sooner encounter than this passion in a child. If Pearl's young beauty, as in the wrinkled witch, it has a preternatural effect. Pacify her, if thou'st love me. Oh my goodness, I can't handle Dimmesdale here. He's basically saying that since he can't handle the child, he's handing her back off to Hester and asking her to calm down the child in her tantrum. If you guys have ever been at a mall and there's like a woman with her family and she's the one, or if it's the father, if basically there's one parent in the two that always has to take charge and take care of the child, this is basically that case. Dimmesdale only wants to see the smiling, happy Pearl coming out to greet him, and just doesn't want to deal with, or he doesn't even know how to start to deal with, Pearl when she's upset or angry. And he's even threatening his love with Hester over her ability to qualify or calm down Pearl. Hester turned again toward Pearl, with the crimson blushed upon her cheek, a conscious glance aside at the clergyman, and then a heavy sigh, while even before she had time to speak, the blush yielded to a deadly pallor. Pearl, said she sadly, look down at thy feet, there before thee, on the hither side of the brook. The child turned her eyes toward the point indicated, and there lay the scarlet letter, so close upon the margin of the stream that the gold embroidery was reflected upon it. Bring it hither, said Hester. Come thou and take it up, answered Pearl. Oh my goodness, so basically at this point, Pearl is saying that it isn't her job to pin the scarlet letter back onto Hester, but that it's Hester's own job to take up the scarlet letter and pin it back onto her breast. Was ever such a child, observed Hester aside to the minister. Oh, I have much to tell thee about her, but in very truth she is right as regards this hateful token. I much bear torture, yet a little longer, only a few days longer, until we shall have left this region, and look back hither as to a land with which we have dreamed of. The forest cannot hide it. The mid-ocean shall take it from my hand and swallow it forever. So Hester's basically hoping that at this point, if she can't escape from the letter in the forest, that she might just travel somewhere with Dimsdale, start a new life together, and that might clear her name. With these words, she advanced to the margin of the brook, took up the scarlet letter, and fastened it again into her bosom. Hopefully, but a moment ago, as Hester had spoken of drowning it in the deep sea, there was a sense of inevitable doom upon her, as she thus received back this deadly symbol from the fate of hand. She had flung it into infinite space. She had drawn an hour's free breath, and here again, and she can't even take an hour's free breath. She's basically stuck with it into eternity, which is why this escapist mindset of going to travel with Dimsdale across the ocean seems so. Okay. The scarlet misery glittering on the old spot, so it ever is, wherever thus typified or no, that an evil deed invests itself with the character of doom. So basically what Hester and the author is clarifying is that Hester has a really hard time escaping from the scarlet letter. When the dreary change was wrought, she extended her hand to Pearl. "Dost thou know thy mother now, child?" asked she, reproachfully, but with a subdued tone. "Wilt thou come across the brook and own thy mother, now that she has her shame upon her, now that she is sad?" "Yes, now I will," answered the child, bounding across the brook and clasping Hesper in her arms. "Now thou art my mother indeed, and now I am thy little Pearl." So you can see here that Pearl owns a little bit of her identity and her mother's shame, and that she doesn't recognize her mother without the scarlet letter on her. I personally think that this is in part due to the fact that Pearl, her whole life, has seen her mother sort of shrouded in the shame, and with this image, even if she doesn't fully understand the meaning behind it. But Pearl all this time has understood that the scarlet letter means sideways glances, whispers behind her backs, and just frowns and scorn. So even if she doesn't know everything behind it, she's understood the repercussions of this, and she wants her mother to own up to it. In a mood of tenderness that was not usual with her, she drew down her mother's head and kissed her brow and both cheeks, but then, by a kind of necessity that always impelled this child to alloy whatever comfort she might chance to give with a throb of anguish, Pearl put up her mouth and kissed the scarlet letter too. Oh, that's just rubbing it in there. Pearl not only wants her to put it back on, but kisses her mom's face and the scarlet letter, basically equating the two to be equivalent in their importance. "That was not kind," said Hester. "When thou hast shown me a little love, thou'st mock me." "Why doth the minister sit yonder?" asked Pearl. "He waits to welcome thee," replied her mother. "Come now, and entreat his blessing. He loves thee, my little Pearl, and loves my mother too, or loves thy mother too. Wilt thou not love him? Come, he longs to greet thee." And then Pearl, always the skeptic, questions, "Does he love us?" Because all throughout her life, Pearl has been shunned by the minister. And as a child and as a smart human being should, she's very curious, almost a little bit fearful of this quick change in emotions. Why should she give his love to him when all this time throughout her life he has shunned her? Why should Pearl have to quickly accept him again when he's had 7 years to get to know her? With acute intelligence into her mother's face, "Will he go back with us, hand in hand, we three together into the town?" this is a big question here. She's asking to qualify her acceptance of him. Will he accept her? Oh, not now, dear child, answered Hester, but in days to come he will walk hand in hand with us. We will have a home and fireside of our own, and thou shalt sit upon his knee, and he will teach thee many things, and love thee dearly. Thou wilt love him, will thou not? And will he always keep his hand over his heart? Inquired Pearl. Foolish child, what a question is that? Exclaimed her mother. Come and ask his blessing. So basically at this point here, Pearl's trying to get a definitive answer to Dimmesdale's meaning or intention, because she had almost had a little bit of happiness or a little bit of hopefulness in the way that she had asked if he would love her or if he would go hand in hand back to the town with her. But that's basically all crushed when Hester says, not now, dear child, because has been told her entire life, not now, in a couple more days, he'll love you sometime. But this sort of solidifies in Pearl's mind, in my opinion, the fact that it's all just talk and no action, that it's all just dreaming. But whether influenced by the jealousy that seems instinctive with every petted child towards a dangerous rival, or from whatever caprice of her freakish nature, Pearl would show no favor to the clergyman. So it's basically saying now, as we would expect, that Pearl is not giving it to the clergyman. She's not going to be kind or show some acceptance to Dimmesdale. It was only by an exertion of force that her mother brought her up to him. So basically Pearl's being dragged over here, hanging back and manifesting her reluctance by odd grimaces, of which ever since her babyhood she had possessed a singular variety and could transform her more mobile physiognomy into a series of different aspects, with a new mistress in them, each and all. The minister, painfully embarrassed, but with a new mischief in them, each and all, hoping that a kiss might, hold up, starting here again. The minister, painfully embarrassed, but hoping that a kiss might prove a talisman to admit him into the child's kindlier regards, bent forward and impressed one upon her brow. Hereupon, Pearl broke away from her mother, and running to the brook, stooped over it and bathed her forehead until the unwelcome kiss was quite washed off and diffused through a long lapse of the gliding water. So essentially what's happened now is that Dimmesdale tries to entreat Pearl by giving her a kiss on the forehead, and Pearl rejects him completely. Not only does she run away from him, but she washes off that kiss from her forehead, basically saying that he would have no time in her life. She then remained apart, silently watching Hester and the clergyman while they talked together, and made such arrangements as were suggested by their new position and the purposes soon to be fulfilled. So Pearl is the only one of the three to realize that all of these plans are basically just dreams, and that realistically they're never going to be together. And now this fateful interview had come to a close. The dell was to be left a solitude among its dark old trees, which were with their multitudinous tongues would whisper long of what had passed there, no mortal be the wiser, and the melancholy brook would add this other tale to the mystery with which its little heart was already overburdened, and whereof it still kept on a murmuring babble, with not a whit more cheerfulness of tone than for ages henceforth. Essentially what's happened at this point is that Pearl is rejecting the minister. She realizes that any plans that Hester and the minister make with each other will not last. Their future is bleak. they're never going to be together. So she doesn't want to be strung on any further. This very last paragraph's language is actually really beautiful. It's basically saying that the only people which know of the story between Hester and the minister are in the trees. But if nobody is ever going to find out what happened, does this mean that they won't succeed with their plans in England? And that's basically saying, yes, they're never going to be together. So thanks for taking the time to learn a little bit about chapter 19 with me. I enjoyed reading through it, and hopefully this gives you guys a dynamic or a bit of foreshadowing of what is to come.